Good morning. On Monday, we took a look at how you would complete a figured bass exercise like the ones given in the AP Music Theory exam. We saw how it could be completed in the allotted time of 10 minutes, how you could do a good job, and basically if you followed the logical voice leading that was suggested by the first chord, you shouldn't have a problem. Today we're going to take a look at how you would complete a similar exercise like the one in front of you. This is a Roman numeral exercise. As you can see, you're given a couple of measures. We have several chords indicated in the lower part of the window in Roman numerals. We also have some small figures here that indicate voice leading. We're going to have an octave of the bass in the dominant chord move to the seventh of the dominant chord. From the key signature and the first chord, we can see that we're in the key of G. When you look at these exercises in your AP exam booklet, you will see that they actually do give you that G here so that you don't have to figure that out. So we're going to go through this exercise rather quickly in a very logical way. Before you do it, you should really go through and see what pitches are used for each chord, unless you're getting really good at imagining them. So we're going to begin with the bass. And I can see that the second chord is a root of the 4 chord, which is C. The third chord is the tonic chord in first inversion, so that bass note is B. The fourth chord shows the 5-4-3 of 2. So we have an applied dominant here. 2 in the key of G is A, C, E. And its applied dominant is E, G sharp, B. Because the figured bass is 4-3, we know that this is going to be E, G, B, D, a dominant 7th chord. And the 4-3 tells us that it's going to be in second inversion. So we're going to put that in here. And that will maintain this B in the bass, which then, of course, goes to the root of the 2 chord, goes to the dominant, and then I'm going to have to use a half note for the last chord because we don't want to have any rests in this exercise. Here is how this exercise sounds at this point. As always, we now add the soprano voice. I know that the closest pitch to this B in the first chord is C. It's half a step away. And of course, the closest pitch for the next chord would also be B. But should I do that? Can you see what I now have? C and C, B and B, parallel octaves. So that won't do. So instead of having this B here, I'm going to let the soprano line continue up to D. D prepares us for the 7th of the 5-4-3. Whenever possible, you want to have a preparation note. Either step down into the 7th by step or keep a common tone. The D in the soprano, of course, must resolve to C. And we're going to go down to A here. You can play around with this exercise and see if you can come up with a different way of doing it. But for me, this worked well because of the constraints in the deceptive progression that you have at the end. As you know, whenever you're moving to chords whose roots are a second apart, you have to be very, very careful. Again, the final note must be a half note. From here, I go on to do the alto voice. I already have a G, which I'm going to keep in the next chord, and it's also the alto in the next chord. The poor altos, they get to sing the same note many, many times, not just in this exercise. G is also a pitch in this chord, but it must be sharped because we need a major chord for an applied dominant. So the altos get to go to G sharp, which is the leading tone to A. And now the next closest pitch is going to be F sharp. And F sharp is going to go to G. So at the end of this, both the alto and the soprano are singing G. Let's take a listen. Take a note here about this progression. We have a perfect fifth between the soprano and the alto, and then a diminished fifth, and then a third. A very, very common progression. All that remains now is to do the tenor, and that's what we're going to do. This is largely a matter of filling in missing pitches. I don't have a third of a chord here. This chord is C, E, G, there's no E. So that's the closest pitch to the D in the tenor, and that's where it goes. Here I'm going back to D. I'm doubling the soprano, which is fairly typical for first inversion triads. If you're just thinking common tones and not watching out for things like, do I have the root of the chord? You might be tempted to put a D here. But you already have a D. What you really need is the root of the chord, which is E. And that's a common tone to the next chord. And now I'm going to double my root in the tenor. But I also see down here that within this beat I have to do 8, which is the tenor, and move it to 7. So this has to become an 8th note. And then I move it to C. And of course it just continues on down to B. And this is our completed exercise. Just as we did in the figured bass exercise, we moved very, very logically, completing the bass first, according to the Roman numerals that were given, wrote a soprano in counterpoint to the bass, and then filled in the alto and the tenor. You're going to have a similar exercise to do today. Give yourselves about 15 minutes and do the best job that you can. Good luck.